About 6 hours into Spec Ops The Line, after the player has stumbled through hell, one of the loading screens addresses you directly. The US military does not condone the killing of unarmed combatants, it says. But this isn't real, so why should you care? During the Vietnam War, soldiers were prepared for deployment with rigorous psychological conditioning. Efforts to make combat scenarios more visceral resulted in ingenious and sick devices that mimicked killing. Uniforms filled with balloons would float across a field and collapse once hit. Jugs filled with red paint would explode on impact. Raw, rotting meat would be strewn about exercise courses, and oranges were taped to sparring dummies to replicate the sensation of gouging out eyes. Soldiers would undergo daily seminars where real-life footage from battle would be played for them, celebrating the gore of war. Look at the impact of an M16. Look at the explosion of this claymore. That home, that school is now destroyed, but don't focus on that. Look at the big boom. Let's go out and play with our new toys. One of the most stark descriptions I've read of Vietnam came from Patrick McKinney's Combat Psychology, Learning to Kill in the US Military. An anonymized soldier, Lonnie, describes the first time he killed someone. I was down and all I could see was his head and shoulders. He had a hard hat on, and then I saw the red emblem. And then when I could see a silhouette, I blasted him. Silhouettes, they're not real people, they're just targets. That's what we were taught to do. Those weren't people, those are silhouettes. 2012's Spec Ops The Line isn't set in Vietnam, it's dressed in the sand and sheen and glitz of an abandoned Dubai, but at its core, it's most interested in simulating that state of mind that Lonnie described, and highlighting just how disturbing and wrong this is. They're not real people, they're silhouettes. There is a moral question at the heart of the game. Who is most responsible for a war crime? Who should bear the brunt? How much social responsibility can we assign to a soldier who pulls the trigger? Or should we turn our anger towards the decision makers who conditioned them? Who is most at fault when these things happen? It's a game that if you haven't played it, which is bloody likely looking at the sales figures, you absolutely should. You can pick it up for pennies on PC or Xbox, and it's currently available on PlayStation Now. To analyse what makes its opening so effective is to spoil the game's whole gist, and it's best enjoyed going in knowing as little as possible, so fair warning, I will be spoiling stuff here. It's the military shooter which ruined military shooters for me, and that's the most ringing endorsement I can give it. Nothing has compared since. It's the sort of experience Call of Duty Modern Warfare wishes it could give its players. But how exactly does it condition a player to see it as just another generic military shooter? What does its framework say about its inspirations? Why is its opening so effective? This is the first 10 minutes.
Can't shake this guy, Walker. Keep her steady. You out of your mind? Trust me.
8 seconds. 8 seconds is how long it takes for Spec Ops to blow something up. The first couple of minutes are less interested in characterization or context and is all about the blastathon. There's a long list of things that the game doesn't even tell you. Who we're playing as, Walker's name is chucked out in passing, his rank, his personality, none of that is even hinted at. Who we're with, we hear Adam's voice over the intercom, but screw Adams, he's not important, he doesn't get a name, get back to shooting. Why we're here, we can recognize the distinct blue sky and glass skyscrapers as Dubai, but the mission, Walker's purpose, isn't mentioned. And most importantly of all, who we're shooting at. Why are these people chasing us? Who do they work for? Who do they represent? It's not even that the enemies are lacking in humanity, they're lacking in identity. They're just silhouettes. We can't even see the enemy, they're hidden inside helicopters. Spec Ops purposefully sets its bar low for thoughtful engagement in this opening. You don't even need to think about resource management, you have unlimited ammunition. The minigun doesn't even overheat, just hold down the R1 button and aim the reticle at the bad guys. Collateral damage is encouraged, and this will continue after this bombastic prologue during the third-person action. Because Dubai's buildings are so consistently made of glass, you can shoot through the skyscrapers, offices, and workspaces to explicitly take out one of the choppers, leading into a gradual transition to glorious slow motion, watching each fat bullet pummel into the metal of the enemy chopper before this faceless, nameless henchman crashes straight into the edge of a crane. The slow-mo cuts away and we race past it before we can see just how gory a death this would be. It's bloodless anarchy. It's a sort of set piece that most action games would have saved until its last moments. Even a Bond film wouldn't blow up half a city during its cold opening. But Spec Ops: The Line wants you to embrace and expect this kind of hoorah shoot-a-thon from its opening seconds. See the enemies not as people, but as silhouettes locked inside machines. This is all here to get you pumped, get you excited, get you disassociating from the violence.
Is John Conrad the greatest man I ever served with? Well, I don't know. There was this one time in Kabul when he dragged my bleeding carcass half a mile to an evac chopper.
We've got to address the Nolan North in the room. I don't think it was any accident that Jaeger, the game's developer, reached out to get the voice behind Nathan Drake to voice Captain Martin Walker. It's common that PlayStation's poster boy is criticised for his bloodthirsty nature in his games, killing waves upon waves of faceless bad guys during his treasure hunts, but Nolan North is synonymous with mindless action fun in games, especially for 2012 with 3 Uncharted titles in the wild. It's another way that the game sets up our expectations. Okay, Captain Walker is going to be a quippy shooter, I'm in for a fun ride. The positioning of John Conrad as this mythical hero that we need to rescue is what directly ties Spec Ops: The Line to Joseph Conrad's famous novella Heart of Darkness. It's a story about a captain who journeys up the African Congo in search of a legend, a man known only as Kurtz. Walker is mocking, self-righteous in his description of Kurtz, speaking directly to the player. The man's a fucking hero. You were probably safe and sound watching TV while Conrad was leading the damn 33rd out of Afghanistan. A reflective, somber guitar drums away in the background. The morning sun fills the scene with nostalgia. We see medals, newspaper clippings, shots with the president, all of the good work Conrad has done, and an unassuming player has no reason to distrust Walker's assumption that Conrad is, in fact, a guiltless hero. That he's hiding out in Dubai against enemy forces which are surrounding him, probably the same faceless baddies we had to shoot down in a chopper earlier. But of course, what we're actually seeing is the last moments of Conrad's life, the morning that he decided to end it all.
Status is chafed, sir.
You say chafe, Sergeant?
Yes, sir. A local airborne insurgency has infiltrated the U.S. zone designated as my pants. Sir.
Shut up, jackass.
4 minutes deep, and we cut to the beginning of Walker's expedition. We finally get to learn a little more about his comrades, Adams and Lugo. It's apt that the first thing we hear after the title screen is a joke by Lugo, a pretty damn funny one too, subverting military speak, military status, to a punchline about chafing. It's here to endear us to the crew, to reinforce our preconceived notions about Nolan North's involvement. This is going to be a light-hearted action game. Right? That melancholic guitar from earlier has turned into an electric, heavy strumming. This is the origin of your action hero role. You're the star of this game. You're gonna kick so much ass. You're a rock star. The credits bleed in over shots of the sand dunes, names we don't recognize, people involved in the direction of the game, but it isn't until we see the sorry, shredded US flag that the game starts its unnerving process of pointing the finger at the player, assigning the blame for anything bad that's about to happen. Special guest, you. In gameplay, we see the reason for Dubai's setting. It's fucking gorgeous. Despite the sandstorm, the pile-ups, the ammunition expended in the bodies, the daytime glow makes the colours saturated and beautiful. There's an optimistic presence over the action in the game's opening, splashing it with joviality and jokes and bright lights to make it feel both cinematic and weightless. Before we even see an enemy, we're learning how cover works, that it works no differently from any other cover-based tactical shooter. We've been here before. In 2012, this felt like every other action game we'd played. Even the UI looks the same, with a clip art gun and ammo count to the bottom right-hand corner. Seeing our first dead bodies, fellow soldiers, barely raises an eyebrow from our brothers in arms. Barely a second later, Lugo's back to cracking jokes.
That's enough, Lugo.
I'm just keeping it light, boss.
We heard in the opening that the evacuation of Dubai had been a failure, that there were hundreds, thousands even dead, but Spec Ops hides the bodies, hides the grizzle. We should see at least one civilian corpse, but it's a bloodless shuffle through the cars and luggage which clutter the entrance to Dubai. It simulates the sense that something wrong happened, but there's no carnage, no violence. Spec Ops doesn't want to get too real just yet. It's still building the player up as an action hero. This march into Dubai is curated. There's no freedom, no way to go off the beaten path. The game restricts the player to one corridor with the illusion of openness, but you can barely walk 2 or 3 feet in the wrong direction. Like a slow-moving roller coaster, Walker and the player is just along for the ride. With just 2 minutes left in our first 10 minutes, Spec Ops has effectively built the player up to feel non-complicit in the game's morals. Seeing blood smeared on a Humvee, the gang note the fresh body of a new member of the 33rd. Look at this, look at what those bastards did. Whoever they are, this is the first bit of blood we've seen. That means it's important, right? That means whoever we're fighting are bad. Whoever we're fighting must be evil. Whoever we're fighting. Wait, who are we fighting? Well, it doesn't matter, right? The game's given us a cool set piece and shooting this bus full of sand to bury them alive, but then Adams notes that they must be refugees, survivors of the storm. We're not shooting another army, we're shooting regular people. They shot at us first. This is a video game. Kill the bad guys. Bang, bang, bang! Spec Ops does this a few times in its first hour. It will introduce a moral dilemma to the player, like shooting refugees, but then encourage the player to wave it away because it's a video game. You can be forgiven for killing these guys because you've been conditioned to see them as a faceless faction. You killed plenty of them in the first 30 seconds, and anyway, this is war, it's kill or be killed, demonstrated by the mechanics themselves. You cannot get out of this first confrontation without shooting the refugees or the sand behind them. Lugo's negotiation will never come to a peaceful conclusion. Either you take them out, or they shoot first. This arena is blocked off until you murder them. But the violence is purposefully diluted in this opening section to make it more palatable. You can give Lugo and Adams orders to attack enemies, but it's labelled in the UI as stun enemies, not kill enemies, despite that being the end result once you've put a couple of bullets into their head. You can execute a downed enemy with a couple of punches to the head. It's violent, but it's not uncomfortably so. This is a video game. You're not expected to feel bad about any of this.
Thought we were rescuing people.
By the 10-minute mark, we're rushed through an explosive, linear battle along the highway. It's exhilarating. Shoot the henchmen, take cover when you need to, swap weapons at your leisure, use the shotgun to blow bad guys' heads off. There's not much blood or gore when you do so, but it still feels good anyway due to the crisp sound design. And that is where the game's opening leaves you. A hard-ass, uncaring about the damage you're doing, enjoying the jokes that come alongside action hero conflict, enjoying the mindless fun that comes with shooting all of these pixels on screen. Spec Ops has crafted its opening to truly embrace that feeling of being any other cheery action game. If the first 10 minutes didn't effectively condition a player to see the game's violence as meaningless, it wouldn't make the game's first big twist nearly as effective. So before we say goodbye, let's take a minute to take a look at it. Jumping ahead, the team find an enemy camp. They argue that they can't go around it, they need to cut through to reach their objective, but there are just so many people, and hey look, there's a white phosphorus mortar nearby. Let's use that for a quick and easy kill. Lugo points out that this is a bad idea, and it's the closest thing to a warning that the player gets from the game, that our likeable, jokey pal is recommending we not do this.
Lugo, there's always a choice.
No, there's really not.
Our targets are faceless again, like we've been led to see them as in the helicopter in the first firefight. Except this time, just like it is in real-life combat situations, the enemy has been reduced to just white dots. Looking at anyone through a machine like this strips them of their humanity. Walker doesn't initiate these strikes, the player does, cold and unfeeling. It's like we've done before with airstrikes in games. Pick the target, push one button, watch the dots disappear. One button is all it takes for the entire game to change. No more jokes as we walk through the camp. The brightness is gone. The saturation reduced by the powder we just rained down. Soldiers are suffering and moaning, but screw them, they're the enemy. They had it coming.
You brought this on yourself.
We were helping.
What? Oh no.
It was a refugee camp. We've just murdered an entire population of refugees, and unlike the opening of the game, they didn't shoot first. Lugo breaks down upon seeing the dead mother and child. Our comic relief yells at the top of his lungs, "This is your fault, goddammit!" Spec Ops the line through Lugo points the finger squarely at the player. This is your fault. Walker didn't push the button, you did, and you did have a choice. You could have played something else, but then you could argue that they're not real people, they're just silhouettes. That was what we were taught to do. Those weren't people, just silhouettes. To Spec Ops, it doesn't matter if they were silhouettes. It doesn't matter that you were conditioned by the game's opening to see it as mindless action. Spec Ops blames and punishes Walker and by extension you. Spec Ops doesn't take responsibility for the death of the refugees. Jaeger doesn't take responsibility for the white phosphorus. You are the special guest. You pushed the button. They just told you to. And whether or not you agree with this stance, that war crimes like this lie at the feet of the soldier who pushed the button rather than those who conditioned him to think it was okay, doesn't matter.
We want to present the different perspectives. We don't want to say that one of them is correct.
Because where shooters like Modern Warfare patronize you with their ambivalent, "we just present different viewpoints" slop, Spec Ops chooses a viewpoint. It chooses a stance. And it all starts with an upside down flag and some silhouettes. Thanks for watching. That's us now settled into our new home, and this is the first video I've recorded in my new office. So quick question, how does the audio sound? I've put panels up around the room, but I'm not sure if it sounds okay or if I need to do some more work. Honest feedback would be majorly appreciated here. Also, a huge thanks to my £2 patrons. Callsign Nor, David Bedard, Brian Garcia, Ross Williamson, Derek 8, The Riftmaker, CC, Jared Helfer, Scott Russell, Graham McLaughlin, Semlin, Beth Littler, John Foster Agg, Robert Capel, Elevator, Matt McCulloch, Guilherme Barreiros Ferreira, Ethan, Paul W, Damp Gibbon, Please Don't Blame, Chief Sweep, Ehor May, Jonathan Lum, Jaker, Robolo42, Paper Synth, Thomas Banchak, Eddie Wingfors, Rees Newton Seeley, Nicholas Here, Cakesters, Strupp, Angry Optimist, Plog Doctor, Adriana Martinez, Chris, Jake Kluzovitz, Croatoan, Long Cheddar, Jordan Halsey, Amory Selden, DB Geek, Ryan Smith, Rasmus Nemvaltz, Toxter, Donis Conva, Ashley Broning, 100 Sams, Neil Dudgeon, Michael Diaz, Bob the Mighty 5454, Dinkin Pearson, Kyle Pears, Chris KK Mack, Seb Scott, Lonely Ronin, Crisp Bread, Zephyr Dawn, Kane Highwind, Neve Care, Johnny Miller. You guys absolutely rock. Thank you so much. And I don't know if you can hear, the birds think you rock as well. Take care.